Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. This is the first of a series of presentations on the verb. We will be discussing different verb tenses later on. Probably the next one is going to be present simple and present progressive or present continuous. But first, I wanted us to go through the topic of verb forms so that you guys know the terminology that I'm using and so that it becomes easier for you to understand what I'm talking about and do the work as I explain further. We will go through what is a verb and different types of verbs, through the forms and the tenses of the verbs, through types of sentences, and then the last 2 points will be some rules on how to form the present tense third person and the ed and ing forms. Now, you might remember that every sentence needs two essential elements to exist. You need a subject and a verb. For example, Sally reads poetry, right? In this case, Sally is the subject because Sally is the one doing the action. Who is doing the action? Sally is. The action is reads, which we call a verb. What is Sally doing? She reads. She reads. Poetry in this case is the object. What does Sally read? She reads poetry. Now, the sentence can exist even if we eliminate the object. Sally reads is a perfectly acceptable sentence. However, we cannot take out either the subject or the verb. Otherwise, the sentence will not make sense. Remember, in English, a complete sentence must contain a subject and a verb. Now, since the subject of this presentation is the verb, let me give you a basic definition. A verb is a main part of speech often used to describe or indicate an action or a state of being. Everyone probably understands what I mean by action. Go, read, write, jump, eat. All of these are actions. But what do I mean by state of being, though? Some verbs are not used to describe an action, so they're not used to describe something that is being done, but something that is. For example, Sally reads poetry is something that Sally is doing. In this case, reads is the verb. However, the cake tastes good. In this case, tastes is the verb. But it's not something that the cake is doing. That would be pretty funny to see. But this is something that the cake is, basically. The cake tastes good. Taste here doesn't describe an action, but a state or a characteristic of the cake. Another example is John seems sad. John doesn't do sad, John is sad. Therefore, seem is not an action verb, but describes a state of being. Flowers smell nice. Once again, not an action, but a state of being verb. The most common state of being verb is the verb to be. We use be to describe a lot of states rather than actions. The cheese is grated. School was fun yesterday. Maya is tall. We often use to be and the other state of being words to link the subject, so cheese, school, Maya, with, uh, with an adjective or an attribute, grated, fun, tall. So we generally use state of being verbs to describe things, while we use an action verb to narrate things. We need both to communicate efficiently or even tell a good story, right? Now, when we form a sentence, the verb helps us find out the time reference of the action or state. What do I mean by that? Let's take our initial sentence. Sally reads poetry. In this case, we know it's a present habit that Sally has. But if we make it Sally is reading poetry, it means that right now, Sally has a poetry book in her hand. The only thing that changed between Sally reads poetry and Sally is reading poetry is the verb. Sally read poetry. All of a sudden, it became a past action or a habit. Sally will be reading poetry. Now it's a future action. The only thing that changed in all of these sentences, as I said, is the verb, more specifically, the form of the verb. So the verb helps us understand the time of the action. And to do that, we form tenses. We alter the verb so that it indicates what tense or time it is. We do that by changing the form of the verb completely. For example, we say run. This is the present form, run. In the past tense, we change the form. It becomes ran with an A. But if we want to make it present perfect continuous, we have to add two extra words. In this case, we have to add have and be. We call these words auxiliary verbs. These are verbs that help other verbs form times. And so in the present perfect continuous, run becomes have been running. So this is the new form of the verb. First, let me quickly show you what tenses there are. Don't be scared because you don't have to remember or learn them really right now. We will go through them as the year progresses, and hopefully there will be other videos explaining them. And don't worry, chances are you already know what they are instinctually, but not their names. So you will get there, don't rush. The easiest way to explain a tense is using a timeline. This arrow represents time. To the left is the past, to the right is the future. The arrow is pointing to the future. In the middle, we have the present or now. Generally, when I try to explain a single event, I will use an X. John fell down the tree. John read last night. These are single events. Then we have the squiggly line, which represents an event in progress. This means that we are emphasizing the duration of the event, not the event itself. John was reading yesterday at 5. He began probably before 5, and he might have continued after 5, but he was in the process of reading at 5. Johnny was reading when his phone rang. So Johnny was in the process of reading and was interrupted by his phone ringing, right? Now that you know the symbols, let's see the tenses. After I say the name of the tense, I will give an example, right? An example sentence. So first we have present simple. I teach English. You study English. Then we have present continuous. I am presenting. You are watching my presentation. Then we have past simple. I ate pizza for lunch. Next is past simple continuous. I was eating lunch earlier. Then there is future. I will eat dinner later. And future continuous. I will be eating dinner at 6. Present perfect. I have eaten today. Present perfect continuous. I have been talking for 30 minutes. Past perfect. It had rained that day. Past perfect continuous. It had been raining for 3 hours. Future perfect. I will have finished my work for the day. Future perfect continuous. I will have been working for 10 hours by then. So once again, there's a lot of them. We will probably go through all of them this year, but each in their own time. So don't be scared. You will be able to do them without any problem. Now that we've seen the tenses, let's get back to the forms of the verbs. There are 3 basic forms of the verb and 1 extra. We have present, past, and participle as forms. To make it easier, they are also called the first form, the second form, and the third form. I will use the latter version in class. So I will call out what's the second form of the verb to be, what's the third form of the verb go, right? The extra form is the ing form. As their name suggests, we generally use the present form to form the present simple. We use the second form or the past form to make the past simple. We use the third form or the participle to make all perfect tenses. So present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect. And then we use the ing form for all the continuous tenses. For example, present continuous or past continuous, etc. Let's go through some verbs so that you can see what I'm talking about. For example, the verb to heal. In present form, it becomes heal or heals. I heal, you heal, he heals. In the past, however, it's healed. Participle, it's also healed. In ing form, it's healing. Then you have draw or draws in the present form. And then you have drew and drawn for past and participle, and drawing in ing. Then you have sing, sang, sung, singing. Then you have watch, watched, watched, watching. Then you have listen, listened, listened, listening. I will go into some rules later in the video. For now, you probably noticed that some of them follow the same pattern or are the same for the second and the third form, and some don't, and you would be right. When it comes to forms, there are two types of verbs. You have regular verbs and irregular verbs. Regular verbs follow the same pattern and are easy to change between the first, second, and the third form. Usually, for the second and the third form, we just add an ed at the end of the verb. So the rule is second form equals third form equals first form plus ed. For example, allow is the first form. We add an ed and we have allowed. And therefore, second and third form is allowed. Allow, allowed, allowed. Other examples are need, need, needed, needed. Spill, spill, spilled, spilled. Try, tried, tried. I will go into the explanation of the last one, the tried, a bit later when we talk about the rules for the forms. When it comes to irregular verbs, though, they don't follow any pattern. They are mostly random. And the only way to know them is by learning them and using them again and again until you don't have to think about it too hard. I guarantee that you already know some of these forms, and some of them are pretty easy. For example, put. Put is an irregular verb because it doesn't follow the classic pattern. Instead, it has an irregular form for both the second and the third form. So we don't say put, putted, putted. We say put, put, put. Pretty easy, right? Other verbs, however, are not as easy. For example, swim, swam, swum. Know, knew, known. Bit, bit, bitten. Before I go on to explain some of these rules, some of the rules you need to know on how to make some of these forms, I need to talk about something very important, types of sentences. Depending on the type of sentence, some of these forms look a bit differently. We have the affirmative and negative sentences. For example, Sally reads poetry is affirmative. Sally doesn't read poetry is negative. We also have questions, which can also be affirmative, does Sally read poetry, or negative, doesn't Sally read poetry? Whenever we discuss a tense, we also discuss what forms they take when they are in a negative or a question sentence. So keep that in mind. Now, we are going to discuss some rules about how we form the first form, and then about how we form the ed form for regular verbs and the ing form as well. You've probably noticed that for the present form, there is a small variation. When we use the verb to talk about another person or an object, we add an S at the end. More specifically, we add an S for the third person singular. What do I mean by that? Here are some examples. The present tense for write is as follows. I write, you write, he, she, it, or Lara writes. We write, you write, they write. We have shoe. I shoe, you shoe, he, she, it, Cedric shoes. We shoe, you shoe, they shoe. Miss. I miss, you miss, Elizabeth misses. We miss, you miss, they miss. Cry. I cry, you cry, Daoud cries. We cry, you cry, they cry. You already noticed that some rules have some exceptions. For the first two words, write and shoe, we just added an S at the end. For the third word, we added an ES at the end. And for the fourth word, we just took the Y and replaced it with IES. And these are pretty much the three rules when we form the present tense third person singular. First one, for most words, we just add an S at the end of the word. The second rule is that we add ES instead of S if the base form ends in S, Z, X, Sh, Ch, or the vowel O, but not in OO. If it ends in OO, as shoe does, we just put an S, not an ES at the end. Here are some examples. Miss plus ES, it ends in S, right? MISS, it ends in S, so we add an ES and it becomes Mrs. Rush, once again, it ends in an SH in a sh, and we add an ES and it becomes rushes. Veto has an O at the end, a single O, so veto plus ES is vetoes. Once again, shoes has two O's, so we only add one S at the end. The third rule is that if the word ends in consonant plus Y, we replace the Y with an IES. So cry becomes cries, worry becomes worries, play, but it has to end in a consonant plus a Y so that we replace the Y. Play ends in a vowel and a Y, right? So because it doesn't end in a consonant Y, we just add an S at the end. So plays has PLAYS at the end, right? So keep that in mind. I suggest that you write down these rules so that it's easier for you to look them up later when you're not sure. Basically, at some point when you get to use these words so much, you will use them instinctually and you won't need to think about the rule. Is this the rule or is it not? But in the beginning, while you're still learning all of this, you need to know these rules so that it's easier for you to figure out how we form this basically, right? And maybe if it's written, it'll be easier for you to just go and look at it written and then use it. Next, we have some rules about ed and ing forms. I'll remind you that the ed form is the second form for the regular verb. Generally speaking, we just add ed and ing at the end of the verb, and that's it. For example, detect plus ed equals detected. Want plus ing equals wanting. However, there are some exceptions, and here they are. When the word ends in consonant plus E, we drop the E and we add ed or ing. So for example, smile ends in an E, we take out the E and we add ing, and we have SMILING. For bake, it's the same situation. We take out the E and we add the ed, and it becomes baked. I know there is still an E there, so the general idea is that you don't do bake ED. So you don't have two E's, you just keep one of the E's over there, right? When the word ends in C, we add an extra K before ed and ing. So for example, picnic, picnicking, mimic, mimicked. And we add a K there, C-K-I-N-G, C-K-E-D. When the word ends in a vowel plus an L, we always double the L regardless of stress. So travel, traveled, equal, equaling, L-L-L-L. When a one-syllable word ends in one vowel and one consonant, we double the consonant. So, for example, nap, napping, stop, stopping. It ends in AP, which is one vowel and one consonant, in OP, which is one vowel and one consonant. Please take care that it has to be only one vowel, right? If it has two vowels and one consonant, then we don't double the last consonant. For example, doom, to doom somebody or something, it has O-O-M. We don't double the M. It's D-O-O-M-I-N-G or D-O-O-M-E-D, right? I'm doomed. And lastly, when a multiple syllable word has the last syllable stressed and it ends in a vowel plus a consonant, we double the consonant. What do I mean by stress? Stress means that we emphasize that syllable, right? When we pronounce it. For example, going, we don't say going, we say going. Pamphlet, we don't say pamphlet, we say pamphlet. Exception, we don't say exception, or we don't say exception, we say exception. Record, record. These two words mean something differently because the stress is different. So once again, if the stress is on the last syllable of the word and the word ends in just one vowel plus a consonant, we double the vowel. If the stress is not on the last syllable, we don't double the consonant. We also don't double it if there are two vowels before the last consonant. So for example, admit, we say admit, we don't say admit, we say admit, therefore we double the last consonant because it has an I and a T at the end. Admitted, admitting. Refer, once again, we don't say refer, we say refer. Fur is the stressed syllable, the last syllable as well, and it ends in a vowel plus a consonant. So we have referred and referring. However, target, target, the stress is on the first syllable, therefore we do not double the last consonant. It's targeted, targeting. Visit, is the same thing. Visit, we stress the first syllable, so we don't double the last consonant. Visited and visiting don't have double T. I know this might seem like much right now, but if you practice these, you will remember them and use them instinctually without having to recall them every time. So for now, note them down and look back once in a while, especially when you're unsure about something. I'm convinced that soon you will know how to use these rules instinctually and all will be very easy for you. Thank you for watching this and I hope you learned something today. Do not hesitate to reach out to me if you still don't understand. Have a great day. Goodbye.